Yes, thank you, Cassiano, and we will give you some insights into our activities on mapping the wool sector from an economic perspective. As geographers, of course, we had to bring some maps today to share with you. And these maps I will present shortly represent the three big parts of the wool sector in the Alpine region. The picture is really very differentiated across the parts of the value chains, but also the region is characterized by complex spatial differences. Each of the three parts, namely the production of raw material, the processing of fabric, and the manufacturing of clothing, show specific spatial patterns. First of all, before we get into the content or addressing the content, what do we see in these maps? We see, try to use the laser pointer perhaps. We see here the region of our project. It's the Alpine Space Program Perimeter. Consists of 42 regions in 7 countries. Then we see the Alp core area with an altitude above 1,000 meters sea level. And at least we see some content. To start with the sheep farms, I brought here the status quo. So it's the number of farms per 100,000 inhabitants. What we see is a concentration of regions with a higher density in the Alpine core area, mainly Tyrol, Austria, and Slovenia. And the second map should be, one second, is the development. So we have 2 indicators. We have the status quo situations and we have the development indicator. What we see here, it's the development from 2010 to 2020, so about 10 years. We see a clear decline of farms, of sheep farms in the region. It's an average decline of 30%, especially in the more northern parts of France, but also in Germany and Slovenia. Looking to the next value creation step, we see the textile industry, so the production or processing of yarns and fabrics. There we have a high density in the Central Alps, but also in northern parts of Germany, and especially in Italy, also Switzerland and eastern parts of Austria. So far for the status quo. But if we look at the development indicator, we see very positive numbers for France and the eastern parts of Austria and also a little bit of Bavaria. And we see a decline in Austria, Bavaria, and especially also in Italy and Switzerland. The last sector, or the last part of this 3 mappings is the clothing industry, so the production of clothing. We see really a high density of enterprises in the northern parts of Italy, especially the regions around Venice and Milan, and quite similar picture in the rest of the region. For the development of the enterprises in the manufacturing of clothing, we see really positive numbers in France, Italy, and Austria, and really negative or a decline in Slovenia, Germany, and Switzerland is somewhere in between. So far for setting the scene with some maps, and I would hand over to Tobias.
Yeah, good afternoon, also from my side. What we saw on the maps is quite different pictures. I mean, there's not one size fits all map for AlpTextyles or Alp wool. It's quite complex. And our role in this project is to give an economic analysis of the situation, and there's hardly any data on a regional level. I mean, when we talk about parts of Germany, parts of France, we do not have official statistics that we can just calculate with. This is why we apply an approach where we use all the statistics we can get, from trade statistics to employment statistics, and we discuss draft statistics or draft numbers with experts, and several of the experts are in this room. Also at this point, thank you for helping us with this. The work will come to final results in the coming weeks and months, so this is work in progress, what we present here. And so the kinds of mapping that I want to introduce now, they are more abstract, but they are still visualizing. And this is a value chain, what you see here, from left to right. It's the production process, from wool farming to retail at the end. And the larger the squares are, the more value creation, I mean economic value creation, value capture you have. And you see on the left-hand side, wool farming is economically, at the moment, not very intensive. And the more you get towards selling, the more interesting or economically relevant it gets. What you also see is that where we have already the data, they tend to be yellow, which says that there's in production both of yarn and of fabric, there's a lot of Italian value creation there. So in northern Italy, we have a lot of concentration in value creation of the wool sector. What you see here with all the flashes, I do not want to go into detail. These flashes or arrows, they indicate what kind of interlinkages you have with regions beyond the Alps, be it in Europe or even beyond, including Asia and so on. The colleague from the Commission this morning told, in general, we estimate with 70% of interactions with regions beyond our perimeter, and this might be something that we have in this sector too. We now come to something that we call the scale and product split. You might call it also a division of labor, because what we have in the wool sector is a value creation process that we see here, which is very much linked to industrial production of clothing, including washing, mainly in Italy, but also with the other steps there. And here we have a lot of wool that comes from Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. So really not from the Alpine region. And this is something where value creation tends to be quite large. And then, doesn't want to move. Then we have another value creation process that starts with wool farming really from the Alpine region, and where also value creation tends to be more within the Alpine region, with exception of washing in Belgium and so on, but there's more value creation in the Alpine region. But that tends to be a lot of products linked to insulation, geotextiles, also carpets and home textiles, so not really clothing. And if it's about clothing, it tends to be quite specialized in niche markets. We heard about Loden this morning from Davide, or from the indoor footwear that we have, so different kinds of outer textile wear that we have there. And this is what we call for the moment being, this is what we call the product split in the Alpine wool sector. They are, of course, there are some links between the two worlds, of course, but it's rather punctual. So if we talk about the Alpine wool sector, it's different worlds that meet here. So there's two different scales. One is very international, the other is rather regional, and there's a product split in a way that you get very different products really from wool. Whatever we make with this picture, you can have very different opinions, and I'm convinced that in this room there are different opinions or perspectives on how to develop this situation, but I think this provides maybe a bit provocative or simplified overview, but this is something that we have discussed with several experts, and I'm looking forward to getting more comments on this. Back to you, Cassiano. Thank you.